Good morning, everyone. Today on True North Now, episode 4, we are joined by the Semler scientific team, or rather, we will be joined by Eric in a little bit. We have Joe with us right now, a recent addition to the Semler team. I'm sure many of you saw the announcement. So today we're just going to talk Semler. We're going to talk Semler's future, some of the goals that they've laid out in terms of Bitcoin acquisition, general thoughts about the market, and kind of go from there. So, Joe, walk us through the process. What made you decide to join Semler? Why were you intrigued by the opportunity? And what are some of your thoughts about, as much you can share, about some of the initial steps that you're going to be taking in terms of being part of the team?
Yeah, Adrian, first, thanks for having me on the show. It's great to be here. Joining Semler, this has been obviously a big decision for me. Incredibly excited to join the team. I think Eric and Renee and now Natalie are, great representatives for Bitcoin overall. Why I decided to join Semler? Well, one, I think the Bitcoin treasury phenomenon is interesting. It's also interesting, working in Bitcoin for many years at this point and kind of seeing the community, how they're reacting to what's going on with the Bitcoin treasury phenomenon, right? Like some people have framed it as, the new altcoin cycle. Other
I've heard
people
that. Yep.
have framed it as, a new way to get intelligent leverage exposure to Bitcoin. And I think the latter is probably a better way to look at it. And it's actually really interesting coming from Unchained, which is, one of the best Bitcoin companies, I think, in the world. Seeing people use Bitcoin as collateral and then take out a loan to buy real estate, buy more Bitcoin, or do whatever, and then seeing the like perpetual swap market in Bitcoin evolve over the years as well. There's always been, in my mind, extreme demand to take on a leveraged Bitcoin position, whether that's the perpetual swap market, futures market, or using something like Unchained. And the reason why, it should be fairly obvious, right? Like Bitcoin is the best performing asset of the last 16 years. It would be incredible if you could amplify those returns that have happened in the past and may happen in the future. And so this idea of, getting exposure to a leveraged Bitcoin position, amplifying your returns with Bitcoin is really intriguing to me. But the solutions that have existed in the past were kind of maybe not as good as they could be. And so this, in my opinion, one of the reasons this Bitcoin treasury phenomenon has caught on to this degree is you get what Saylor deems intelligent leverage. You get Bitcoin, when you buy shares of these Bitcoin treasury companies. These Bitcoin treasury companies may issue convertible notes or preferred equity, which effectively gives you a slight conservative, intelligent degree of leverage. For one, if it's convertible notes, the interest rates are fairly low. Even the preferred equity, the interest rates are relatively low compared to what you might get in the perpetual swap market if the market is really hot, or with other Bitcoin collateralized lenders that may exist. And so the interest rates are fairly low. And then the other big thing, I think, is there's no short-term liquidation risk. And so if you're in the perpetual swap market and you want to go, 1.2x long Bitcoin, well, if Bitcoin wicks down 80% overnight, your position is closed out, you're liquidated. And even if the price went back up to where it was, you lost all your Bitcoin. And so I think with the way that these Bitcoin treasury companies are structured, you have no short-term liquidation risk. You have a long-term liquidation risk. Obviously, if Bitcoin goes down 80% over an extended multi-year time horizon, then obviously these companies that take on leverage will be in trouble. But you don't have that short-term liquidation risk. And we all know that Bitcoin is extremely volatile. And so you want to protect yourself when it comes to these short-term swings that have occurred and, in my opinion, will probably continue to occur. And so I think that, going back to why I joined Semler, I think the idea of this intelligent leverage Bitcoin position is, an incredibly great product. And I think Semler being, the second publicly traded company to adopt a Bitcoin standard, they've caught on to this. Eric and Renee, deeply understand why this is a good strategy. And that's why I decided to join the team. The second reason I guess I joined Semler is because a lot of these Bitcoin treasury companies are great, and like they are effectively just creating this leveraged Bitcoin position. But Semler also has a valuable healthcare business with it. So I think that's a unique, interesting framing that a lot of the other Bitcoin treasury companies don't have. And Eric has talked about this many times, but when he initially adopted the Bitcoin standard at some point last year, 2024, he always thought that he was in a very similar position to Michael Saylor when Michael Saylor adopted it for MicroStrategy back in 2020. It was a profitable, cash flow positive business. The growth was slowing. The cash as a percentage of the corporate balance sheet was relatively high. They debated doing some acquisitions, but you got to pick the right company to acquire. You got to acquire at the right price. And then he was like, wait a second, this Bitcoin thing is interesting. I might as well get some exposure to it and then put it in the corporate treasury. So that's another reason why I decided to join Semler. I see Eric is here with us, and so my final reason why I decided to join Semler is the leadership with Eric and Renee and now Natalie on the board. I think they're very professional. They're highly intelligent, and so extremely excited to now be a part of the team.
Fantastic. Eric, thanks for joining. Now
you
that
hear
you're
me?
here, I'll piggyback to you. I just asked Joe what are some of the reasons why he joined Semler. So if you can share with us, what are some of the reasons why you wanted Joe to join the team? I mean, we can speculate, but it's always good to hear it from the horse's mouth.
Great. Well, great to be here. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep, we do.
Okay, great. Sorry, I was being blocked out. I really enjoyed listening to you guys. I couldn't comment, which is probably a healthy thing. Anyway, well, I think that Semler really needed to deepen its connection to the Bitcoin community. I think we also needed to just increase our firepower to execute on our strategy, meaning just having, more ideas, more people in the room to discuss really strategic moves that we should make. Right. And when we first started this journey, it was a lot simpler, right? There was there were no metrics when we started. There was no Bitcoin yield. It was really a very straightforward strategy that has gotten more complex, right? And so as the complexity increases, and now we have such a plethora of companies doing this, that there's kind of this, loudening debate about what is necessary to succeed in terms of MNAV or Bitcoin yield and differentiation and having a second business and things like that, that you definitely need to have a stronger, deeper team with a strong connection to the Bitcoin community. These decisions we made to bring on Joe and Natalie were not superficial decisions. People have to understand these were deeply substantive decisions. These were decisions we needed to really strengthen our approach to Bitcoin treasury. If you think about it, Semler Scientific is a company with roughly a $600 million market cap and $700 million enterprise value. And we have 80-ish employees, mostly who work in the healthcare business. It was really just Renee and me, our CFO, Renee, and myself. And so we have $500 million of Bitcoin on our balance sheet. So most of our value, frankly, is in the Bitcoin. Yet we have 80-ish employees who are not really working on that and are not, really trained to do that. So we have to build a team. We have to increase that team, and I think that that's an imperative for all Bitcoin treasury companies. So that's why. And so knowing that, we went out and reached out for people who we thought were very knowledgeable in executing on Bitcoin treasury, have done a ton of work on it. Joe's written some amazing, white papers basically on Bitcoin treasury. He's interviewed so many people in that space. He's focused on it. He has, a very good academic and professional background to do this. So that was a no-brainer. I think the second thing with Natalie was just, Natalie is such a prominent voice. She's a content creator. She's kind of, she's pioneering new ways of doing content. She's at the center of every conference. She just interviewed Peter Schiff and Trace Mayer, in a debate. And she didn't just sit there and listen to them talk. She added value to that debate. She is a moderator. She is a podcaster. She is like the kind of the most prominent podcaster in our space. But she also has an opinion, a strong opinion about Bitcoin, about gold, about all the different things that are happening out there. She's got her finger on the pulse of everything that's happening, and that has tremendous value. She has done some incredible networking for us already in terms of introducing me, who, I'm relatively new to the Bitcoin community, to people that, are just, kind of foundational to the Bitcoin world, who have taken an interest in our company, either owning stock or just wanting to be helpful. And so I think all that can go a long way.
Fantastic answer. That was a lot of context. So along the lines of what's been happening in the space, if we take a look at strategy as kind of a juxtaposition, they started in August of 2020. Since then, they've got now almost 600,000 Bitcoin in the balance sheet. They've got an insane open interest in the options market. They've got a lot of interest around the common equity. They've got Strike, they've got Stripe, they've got Stride, and these kind of multifaceted ATM levers, these 3 ATM levers that they have, which I would assume would go to 4 with Stride. It has seen tremendous growth, but they went through a lot of tribulation before they got to that point. Semler, being about a year into it, how do you project your future forward? I know you've recently shared with the market that you have a goal to hit 105,000 Bitcoin. Now, I know you probably can't get into too many details about it, but given the fact that you've now cleared the recent hurdles that it seems that were standing in front of you, if you project forward, what do you think the pathway to 105,000 Bitcoin look like? Without getting into too many details.
Sure. Yeah.
And first I'll ask Joe, and then I'll ask Eric.
Yeah, I think that we're exploring probably, I'm guessing a dozen different ways to do that. And I mean, it's not as straightforward as just tapping on the ATM or doing a preferred offering or, convertible, et cetera. I think there's multiple ways to do this. And, it helps that we're a strategic asset and that there's a lot of interest in our company, and the value that we're sitting on. So there's a lot of different ways to do this. And we're going to be very methodical about it. We're not going to, just jump on the first thing that looks interesting to us. We're going to really evaluate all these different alternatives that we're considering. But the reason we gave that guidance was that we felt clarity. We felt like there's enough opportunity and optionality to the levers we can pull that we can get there. And we had finally, I think, found some clarity in our healthcare business, which has been a little bit of a headwind over the last 6 months or so. And I think we made this announcement that we plan to take our future business opportunities in medical and put them in a new entity that we're hoping will have capital behind it, not just from us, but from others, and that it will kind of emphasize and show the value of the business that we're spinning off, or it's not a spin-off, it's a new subsidiary called Cardiovanta. So there's a lot of dimensions to this. I think that where I sit now has evolved a little bit. I think that the proliferation of Bitcoin treasury companies mandates that you have to have a company that is more than just a company that buys Bitcoin on its balance sheet. You have to have a company that is got a story of operating cash flow that can buy Bitcoin. And I think that's really important that we drive that and be innovative in terms of our ability to use operating cash flow to buy Bitcoin, because that's the most creative way to buy Bitcoin. And it's being kind of ignored by most of the companies out there. I think there's this kind of lifeline people are throwing out there for businesses that are almost, don't exist. Like some of these companies have no revenue and, are losing money. And there's kind of that Bitcoin is their lifeline, which is great. And, we all appreciate them doing this. I'm not saying they shouldn't. I'm glad they're doing it. And it obviously helps the movement of, corporate treasury. And that helps drive the price of Bitcoin up, which is a great thing. But I do think if you take a longer term view, it's really important to have a second business. It's really important to have a healthy operating cash flow business that can drive creative purchases of Bitcoin. And that's, I think that's going to differentiate Semler.
Joe,
yeah. Eric hit on it pretty well there. I would just add that I completely agree with the idea of having a valuable operating company that exists outside the Bitcoin industry, combined with kind of what I was talking about at the very beginning, this idea of intelligent leverage. I think it gives Semler a unique strategic advantage to really be able to ramp up our Bitcoin accumulation strategies in a unique way compared to a lot of the other Bitcoin treasury companies.
Along those lines, and let's keep going on that path, the explosion in the Bitcoin treasury company space has been rather surprising. This is something that Eric, you and I have talked about over the months. I know, Joe, you've mentioned this through the different appearances that you've had, but seeing that where we went from when Strategy first did it to then to then Metaplanet, and now all of a sudden it seems like we're seeing a couple of new ones every week, right?
Yeah.
So it can give the impression of a mania phase. But what I want to throw out for consideration is, what if it's just an adoption phase? What if we're seeing that S curve of adoption trending upwards right now, and with that S curve comes a rapid proliferation of various companies adopting the strategy? Now, Eric, you already spoke on the fact that some companies are probably using Bitcoin as a lifeline. Some companies do have a strong operating business. But with Semler, one of the things that you consistently spoken on is your operating business and how that could be a differentiating factor going forward. And I say all of that to say this. Now that you're seeing the explosion in the space, does it give you more confidence in the decision that you made a year and change ago to adopt a Bitcoin treasury strategy? And where do you see this trend going? Do you think we are in a mania phase? Do you think that we could perhaps see it slowing down? And Joe, I'd like your thoughts on this first, and then Eric will go to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the idea and the sign that so many companies are pursuing this Bitcoin treasury strategy is extremely bullish. It's kind of like what I was mentioning at the beginning. A lot of these companies obviously traded a premium to the underlying Bitcoin that they hold, which to me is a sign that the market is in high demand for this intelligent leverage, meaning this intelligent leverage for amplifying future Bitcoin returns. And I think, why does the market demand a product like that? Well, it's like Bitcoin is a, $100-something thousand asset right now. Gold parity for Bitcoin would be $1 million per Bitcoin. I think the market is really just trying to adjust towards a more appropriate market equilibrium in the fastest manner as possible. And so I think it's just capital that's outside of Bitcoin today is demanding to get amplified exposure to Bitcoin. And these companies out there that are coming to the market are really just trying to meet that natural market demand to send the price of Bitcoin significantly higher. So I'm thinking back to when I heard MicroStrategy first adopted a Bitcoin treasury strategy, and then when Eric came out and Semler adopted a Bitcoin treasury strategy. Those two I remember pretty clearly when it happened. A lot of these other ones, like I don't remember like the specific day that each one has come out with a Bitcoin treasury strategy, but I do think it's very promising that more and more companies are adopting it. And another thing that I've always liked what Eric has done is he's done the Zombie Zone series. So trying to find companies that their growth has slowed. They still have significant operating margin, and they could begin funneling a lot of cash flows into Bitcoin. And I expect that if this bull market continues for Bitcoin, we will start to see other zombie companies eventually following in the footsteps of MicroStrategy and Semler, and hopefully it won't just be Bitcoin treasury companies that have no other operating business. But I think over the long run, it's almost going to happen. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah, I think the cool thing about all this proliferation is that it's going to kind of create a norm, right? Where companies just own Bitcoin on their balance sheet. Some will be aggressive about it, and some will just say, "Hey, it's great to have some Bitcoin on our balance sheet because it's got a great upside," and that's a good thing. And so I think that it probably levels off a little bit, and then you will have companies just have some, maybe not all of their cash, maybe a portion, but it's just kind of becomes the norm. It's kind of like the analogy is to the internet. Early days of the internet, there were all these people that were putting .com on all their companies, but they weren't really .com companies. And I think over time, everybody kind of jumped into the adopted an internet, had a website at least, let's just say. And so I think that that's just kind of the way it's going to be. It's going to become a norm.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree. I think that the normalization is going to seem a bit hectic because it's been a bit of a blur with all these companies adopting, but I think it bodes well for the future. But that brings up another thing. You know what everyone loves to talk about, right? Number go up when it comes to Bitcoin. And what we're seeing this cycle, and I'd really like to get both of your thoughts on this, is we've seen, so last year we had the yen carry trade unwind. This year we've had prolonged series of exchanges and conflicts in the Middle East, Israel, Iran, Palestine. There's a lot of uncertainty in that region, and a lot of fear. We've also had the tariff uncertainty. The tariff plan was initially far more aggressive than some anticipated, and there's been some normalization in that, but there's still a little bit of uncertainty. Plus, we have a little bit of uncertainty with regards to where interest rates are going to go in the near term. I say all that to say this. Bitcoin has been trending over $100,000. And Joe, you might know the exact figure better than me, for over 50 days, I believe. Something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
Me being someone that's been in the space since 2012, the fact that we haven't tanked a good 30% on all of those is rather surprising. And I think it's a very, very good sign for where this cycle can go. Not asking you to get into any number predictions or anything like that, but what do these dynamics tell you about Bitcoin's resiliency in this cycle? It's been extremely resilient. It is all the significant dips we saw have been bought up. We've been trending over 100K now for over 50 days. Where do you think that means we're going by the end of this year, perhaps into next year?
Yeah, I can start and then we can go to Eric. Yeah, I mean, you brought up the idea that Bitcoin has been extremely resilient through all of those things. I'm thinking back to March 2020, one day where Bitcoin fell 50% basically
COVID crash,
in one day, which was a crazy day in the space of Bitcoin. But when you have the price being set at the margin and a lot of short-term leverage traders getting liquidated, it was something that shouldn't have been too surprising to eventually see. But I completely agree. Like I think the VIX earlier this year, late last year, spiked to levels that were not seen since March 2020, and before that, the 08-09 financial crisis. And still, Bitcoin, did not fall like it did in March 2020. In fact, it basically matched NASDAQ, which is pretty impressive considering it's been outperforming NASDAQ over any significant amount of time. And so, yeah, I think it is extremely promising for the future of Bitcoin. Another point that I think is really interesting is the idea of Doge, and obviously not the coin, but the Department of Government Efficiency.
I'd be specific on that one.
Yeah, exactly. We saw, initially the Trump administration and Elon were extremely excited about, cutting a lot of government spending and trying to balance the budget. And then we have, people like Lynn Alden out there saying, hey, this train has no brakes. The government can't stop spending without effectively crashing the entire system. The train is going to keep going. We're going to keep spending. And we just saw with a tweet, I think from Trump, or a post on Truth Social from Trump last night, basically highlighting the idea that, hey, like with the new big, beautiful bill, this thing actually might not have brakes. And it's becoming pretty clear that you do need a new global neutral reserve asset that is outside the hands of government and can't be debased by government. And I think it couldn't be more clear that Bitcoin is becoming the asset that's going to serve that role for corporations, individuals, families, and governments themselves.
Eric, your thoughts?
That's great. No, I got nothing to add to that. That's fantastic.
Oh, good. Perfect. So, the future looks bright. The proliferation of Bitcoin treasury companies is definitely a positive sign, as we discussed. The price action is definitely a positive, as we discussed. Now that we seem to be on the cusp of strategy, well, not seem to be, in all likelihood we are, today going to see that strategy becomes eligible for S&P 500 inclusion. We have seen them go through extreme turmoil in the bear market of 22 due to what I like to call the rehypothecation bubble that popped. And now that they've grown, and now that they've been able to scale, and now that we see that they are going to be eligible for S&P 500 inclusion, if we were to scale that forward, where do you see Semler in 5 years? I know that this is not something you can give specifics on, but let's just ballpark it. Staying the course definitely is going to play a part in that. But do you envision Semler scaling much, much larger than it is right now? And where do you think the market is going to position Semler? Do you think Semler is always going to be seen as an early adopter? Or do you think that Semler is going to be seen as, kind of like what we've been alluding to, just another member in this treasury explosion, with strategy being the pinnacle?
Well, I have pretty ambitious vision here. So I would say that in 5 years, I really like the look in 5 years. I'm a long-term investor. I like being an underdog. So like, I really like kind of the image of 5 years from now, especially as it relates to both of our businesses. We've given these long-term targets, confident that we can reach them. In 5 years, hopefully we'll even have newer targets and more ambitious targets. And in healthcare business, I'm hoping we'll have a great product in heart failure by then. And who knows, maybe we'll be able to test people for PAD someday in the future. We are still testing them, but I'm saying in a much broader reimbursement regime. And we'll have new products, I believe, in cardiac arrhythmia and other areas. So we'll probably be a very good synergistic two-pronged story with a really strong flywheel. I really see that. In terms of our Bitcoin holdings, I think they'll be large enough where we will be major owners of digital real estate. And I do believe that creates amazing opportunities to have kind of a quasi-bank approach to owning Bitcoin, where we can leverage the power of our digital real estate, where we'll be able to we'll be like lenders of last resort, people that really need to get their hands on Bitcoin. We will hopefully be holders at much lower levels than where it's trading. So our average price will be significantly below that, so that there will be a lot of optionality in terms of profitability and things like that. But we never plan to sell any of our Bitcoin, but we do plan to monetize it in the sense that there's massive demand for yield generation or borrowing. And JP Morgan and Bank of America and UBS are in the business, and they're trusted banks that we could do business with, and they are dying to pay us fees for our Bitcoin, and we own a lot more than most people. I think that that's a good place to be in.
Yeah, I mean, like I mentioned at the start, I think Semler has the potential to build, one of the largest Bitcoin treasuries in the world with their two-pronged approach of, the healthcare business that's valuable, and then the Bitcoin treasury. So, yeah, I mean, I think the 5-year outlook is great. It's why we decided to issue that guidance on our Bitcoin accumulation targets. And yeah, I couldn't be more excited for the future.
Excellent. Now, along the lines of the future, some more. Eric, you've been the face of this entire process up to now, and I assume, no one to put words in your mouth, that with Joe and Natalie joining, we're going to have the faces of Semler versus the face of Semler. So, given the fact that your team has expanded, you've made these additions, and you're looking towards the future, do you see yourself perhaps stepping back a little bit with regards to the front-facing role and letting Joe and Natalie take that over, or do you plan on like having a blended approach where the three of you in tandem are the faces of Semler that go to the market, do these kinds of appearances on the live streams, things of that nature, and is that something that you are still thinking through, or is there something you have any set plans on? I know you probably can't give too many details, but this is a question I've gotten from several people, so I'm posing it to you now.
Sure. I mean, I'm totally open-minded about that. I don't feel any sense of territorialness about that. I just think that, whatever is best for our company and our, and our image and just in telling the story, I'm totally open to that. And, it is a burden to have to do this myself. And that, some people would say, he brought these guys in so that, they could present for him or whatever, which is great. I'm all for that. It takes some burden off me. And I would love, for Joe and Natalie and Renee and others to tell the story and just share that responsibility. Would be fantastic.
Joe, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think Eric and Renee are great speakers for Bitcoin, and obviously they're highly intelligent, but happy to take over specific podcasts when Eric doesn't want to fill in or talk about Bitcoin and similar. So yeah, I mean, I'm extremely excited about it. I hope Eric doesn't go too far away. But I'm ready to take the reins as much as I can to try to build one of the largest Bitcoin treasuries in the world and create as much value for shareholders as we possibly can.
Awesome.
Excellent. So the closing question that I have here is kind of touches on what we've already discussed a little bit, but more of a broader view. You're 1 year into this, and I guess you can say that at this point you are OG plays along the lines of these Bitcoin treasury strategies because you're one of the first entrants, you're like the second entrant into the space. With that said, now that you've gone through a year, what are some of the lessons that you've learned? And this is more for Eric. What are some of the lessons that you've learned in terms of being in the space, seeing a few drawdowns in Bitcoin, hearing a lot of the noise that comes up in the space with regards to whether it be ambulance chaser lawsuits or general sentiment or investor concerns, and how differently the Bitcoin community can sometimes react to that? What are some of the lessons that you've learned in that process?
A lot. I've learned a lot. I think that when you come into this without really understanding the social media aspect of it, it's difficult. I think that didn't fully appreciate that. What an impact that would have on the telling of the story and the stock and the active nature of that. And that was something to adjust to. I think, though, that it's been, if I really step back and think about it, it's just been an incredible experience. I don't think people appreciate how much Bitcoin has really, what it has done for our company. We are up 100% in a year. Okay. I know that's pretty shabby for most people in the Bitcoin world, but our stock has really performed well under kind of, historical terms. But it would probably be a lot higher if our healthcare business had not run into so many headwinds, right? Not just fundamental, but regulatory. So I do think about where we would be without Bitcoin, and it would not be where we are in terms of our stock price. So thank you to Bitcoin, right? And thank you for I'm so happy that we made this decision. I feel so great about it. And it's so damn early, right? It's just like, let's things can change quickly. And, there's this, I've been an investor for 30 years of my life. I've seen a lot of ups and downs. I've seen, stocks work for a year or 2 years and then just crash and burn. I've invested through so many different, mega trends and watch certain mega trends work and others not. And so I have I'm pretty leathered to this experience, and it's, I am extremely optimistic about where we're positioned in this situation. But it does require a lot of work, especially on the healthcare side. Not so much on the Bitcoin side. I feel like the healthcare part of it has been more trying for me than I expected. I joined the board, and our business was doing about 70 million of revenue and over 20 million of EBITDA when I joined the board. And I did not expect it to decline in the way it has. And I really did expect the heart failure product to be approved by the FDA by now. And I assumed that even with PAD declining, which we knew it would decline, that it would be replaced, in relatively good order by heart failure, which is potentially a much bigger product and market. So I wasn't that concerned fundamentally about it. The DOJ thing did come as a surprise to me. I did not expect them to, out of nowhere kind of say, "Hey, we're going to sue you," or if you don't settle with us. And, that involved something that, from my standpoint, I wasn't at the company when a lot of those the things that the investigation were about were preceding me by many years, so I don't really know all the actualities of it, but I do know that we've disclosed that it involved a very technical interpretation of plasmography, and whether the type of plasmography we used in our product was reimbursable or not, going back to when we were focused on Medicare B, which we're not focused on in the business anymore. The customer who we don't work with anymore. So it's kind of like to me, it's that part of it probably got more airplay than it deserved. The amount of the damages really were relatively modest and manageable. So like it's just a bad headline. And then shareholder suit potential deadline. You see headlines about people trying to, drum up shareholder suits. That's going to happen anytime you have things like that pop up. And again, that's just something that doesn't look great on the surface, but I think we'll just persevere through all of this and, do fine. The DOJ settlement is, it's done in principle. It just has to go through some bureaucratic hoops, but it's generally, going very smoothly, and, nothing that I'm concerned about there. I do think there's some opportunities for us in the healthcare business. I think the FDA should approve our heart failure products sometime in the near future, and that would be enormous for us. And I think that we are hopefully going to start doing business in cardiac arrhythmia soon, which is a huge market. And PAD, what we've done in PAD has saved hundreds of thousands of lives, we believe. And we think it's just a product that needs to continue to be there to save lives. What we do as a company on the medical side is we combat chronic diseases. We try to catch stuff early before people get really sick and can't really, avoid heart attacks and strokes and amputations and death. And so we're doing really important work that is aligned with the government's focus on chronic disease and combating chronic disease. So, you would think that we would be almost like a poster company for MAHA, in what we do, which is, being led by RFK Jr., who has most of his net worth in Bitcoin. So like, if you really step back for a second, you think about it, you're like, God, Semler Scientific should just be like the greatest, story for RFK Jr. And, he could just say, he could do a lot to help us, and one is with PAD. He could just say, look, Elizabeth Warren should never have, whatever she did, ended up getting rid of, screening for PAD, early asymptomatic PAD. Should never have happened. We need to reverse that, because we need to catch that asymptomatic chronic condition early. He could help us with that. He could also he could also help. I don't know to what extent he can, but he could kind of. He's got to believe that our product for heart failure has got to be a really important product out there. I really believe that. And as far as the DOJ is concerned, I mean, we are going down the settlement path, but I would be shocked. It would shock me. If RFK Jr. heard that he would actually be a potential plaintiff, and if we were going to go forward with a lawsuit, he would be the plaintiff. That's nuts. Like, would RFK Jr. want to sue us? I mean, I don't think he has any idea that he could be the plaintiff in a case against us when we're a company that's kind of, probably one of the most prominent companies combating chronic disease, and also a Bitcoin treasury company. So a lot of this just doesn't make any sense, right? It's just kind of, it's bizarre when you think about our position, and we should be in the opposite position. We should be like just, just showing amazing opportunity in healthcare, and we should be off to the races buying Bitcoin. But, sometimes it takes a little while for, the truth to rise to the surface.
That was a lot of context. I appreciate it. So do either of you have any closing thoughts here? I pretty much had all the questions I wanted to ask answered. I know that you two have been in the space. Joe, you've been in the space for a while. Eric, you've been in the space now for a little bit of time. So now that you are now officially on the team, Joe, and now Eric, that Joe is officially on the team, do you have any closing thoughts for what we can expect in the next few weeks from Semler in terms of appearances, in terms of news, anything at all that you can share?
Yeah, I mean, I can start. For me, now that I'm joined the team, I'm ready to start accumulating as much Bitcoin as possible. I'll be pushing Eric to do that as much as we possibly can, even though I know obviously exactly. I know Eric will want to do that as well. And yeah, once I really get settled in, I'm excited to start going on a number of different external podcasts. I appreciate the invite, Adrian. This has been an incredible experience just speaking with you and sitting down with Eric. But I expect to start making the rounds and talking about, our strategy and talking about Bitcoin, of course, as well. So couldn't be more excited.
Eric, closing thoughts?
Just echo what Joe says. I think Joe's going to help us tremendously. He really officially started today, but I feel like he's been working for us for like 6 months. Because he's he, even though he's on vacation and dealing with some really important personal things, he really made the time, and I can tell that he is raring to go, which I'm so fired up about. And I think we're just we are in a really good position right now, and I'm excited about that. And I'm just so grateful to you, Adrian, for your support and for getting our story out there and debating it with people and believing in us. It says so much about you that you're a person of substance, and you cut through the bullshit of all the noise out there and find the signal. And I really think you're just an incredible analyst, and someone who really understands kind of the long-term picture.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I do try to cut through bullshit as much as possible. And it does upset people, but I'm still going to keep doing it anyway. So that's just who I am. But Joe, Eric, thank you very much for joining me this morning. Thank you, everyone watching this. This will be up on the True North page at some point on YouTube once we get that uploaded. And you should probably see it circulating through X throughout the day and throughout the week. We will have other True North Now episodes coming up, but today's was with Semler Scientific. We thank you for joining, and I hope to talk with you all very, very soon.
All right. Take care, everyone.
Adrian.
Thank you. Bye.
See ya.
Bye.